Hello and welcome to this first ever webinar here at Gumloop. I'm super excited. Thank you all for joining live. It means so much that you're taking time out of your day. I'm super excited. My name is Aaron Kornblatt. I'm the head of community and education. And I can't wait to kick this off and talk to you about how to enrich any lead with our new partnership with Apollo. We're going to spend most of today building some cool stuff, but I want to take a moment to acknowledge you all for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Who do we have in the chat? If you've never used YouTube before or as a live stream, you can use the chat. That's where I can see your questions, and that's where you get the value of coming live. So let's see who's joining us. We got Sumathi. Welcome. Appreciate you joining. O'Hearn from Tampa. Jyoti from San Francisco. Richard from the UK. Appreciate you joining. I know it's a little late for the UK. We're trying to make these a little more UK friendly. We got Leo from Brazil, one of our experts. I really appreciate you joining. I got Timotepi, hopefully I'm saying that right, from Calgary. Really appreciate all of you joining. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I can't wait to build with you. Really, we're going to spend most of today building out a lead enrichment flow, and we're going to try to do this much more often. I really love building, and there's been so much excitement from the community in terms of building. Welcome, Sterling. Good to see you. Got a lot of experts in the chat. Really appreciate all of you joining. As Kate said, excited to build. I'm also really excited to build. So let's jump right in. So our goal for today is to build a lead enrichment flow with the new Apollo node that we launched last week. So I'm going to walk you through what I'm thinking of building. And as always, please use the chat to kind of adjust and tell me questions, Q&A. Really, you're taking the time out of your day. I want to make sure you get as much value out of today. So let's jump into our little workflow. If we've ever had the chance of joining a cohort or using university, you know how much of a fan I am of building out a little workflow before understanding what we're going to build in Gumloop. Welcome, Adrian from Seattle. So this is our goal. So we have going to bring in a lead email. Then we're going to enrich the company, get an understanding of how many employees work there, what does that company do, maybe a description. Then we're going to enrich the contact, who specifically is reaching out to us, what is their title, their seniority, their work experience, and then have an ICP definition. If you're not familiar, ICP means ideal customer profile. That's going to be a document that we kind of maintain internally of our understanding of the types of leads we want to speak to. And then we are going to provide all of that to AI to give us a score out of 10. So that is kind of at a high level what we want to build. So our goal is to kind of enrich this sheet right here as an example of our workflow. But let's dig in a little bit more into what we mean by enrich company and enrich contact. Now, I really like spending a little bit of time building out my workflows before I build them in Gumloop. And that because this actually looks very much like what we're going to build in Gumloop, and it allows me to think through the different steps of my flow, of my workflow before I start building. So let's dig into what do I mean by enrich company. So what I want to say is I want to grab a domain that's going to be part of the email. I want to scrape their website. I want an AI summary of what they do, and I'm going to call that description, right? So when I say get company information, this is what I mean. And then I'm going to use Apollo to get the employee count. So those are going to be the two inputs or outputs I get from the domain. And when I say enrich contact, I want to go to Apollo, get their title, get their seniority, get their employment history, and all of that together gets fed into AI to give us a score. So hopefully this makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. So Sterling build out something similar. Welcome Meditation from Bend, Oregon. Welcome, Danny. Excited to have you here. Adrian, some familiar names. Appreciate you coming in. If you have any questions, always let me know in the chat. Okay, so let's start building this. So I'm going to jump into Gumloop. This is our canvas. So here, this is a flow. Now, flows are steps. This is a replication of what you want your automation to do. And then the individual steps, right? If we look at this, each one of these will be nodes. Now, I think the easiest and best place to start is this one right here. So in Gumloop, often you build little pieces of automation. This might be a little different than what you're used to, right? We want to build little functions if you're more a developer focused. We're going to build this piece out right here. So we're going to start with a domain. Now in Gumloop, when you're starting with something, that's often going to be an input field. So we're going to put that input node right here. And I'm going to test. So I'm going to call this domain. So this is the name of my input that I can use throughout my flow. And to test, I'm just going to use gumloop.com. So now I have my input. This is going to be the starting point for this automation. And let's save that. Yeah, so there's a great question. What if you already have your list? Yeah, that's exactly it. We're going to build this little piece that takes any email and gives us all their information. And then we can use that in whatever we want. A sheet, a CRM, a Slack message, an interface, right? In Gumloop, you think of small pieces. So we're going to build this piece. We're going to build this piece. Then we're going to bring it all together such that in any place where we have an email, we can get a lead score and research. So that's a great question, J75P. Okay, so what do we want to do? So I have the domain. And what I want to do, if I look at my little flow here, is I want to scrape the website and get an AI summary. So let's go to our node library. These are the different things you can do in Gumloop, the different steps. We call those nodes. I'm going to search for scrape, and I'm going to use the website scraper. So I bring in that node. Now this node takes a URL and then outputs the content of that page. Now my site lives here right now. So to pass information across nodes, to say, take anything that's here and put it here is a two-step process. First, you need to connect the nodes. That makes that information available, right? So now I have domain, and I can either type at, and then I see the domain, the thing I connected, or I can drag and drop. There we go. So now I have domain. I'm going to do that one more time. I can do at domain selected. So now this is saying whatever is here is going to be passed into here. Now let's run our flow. This is saying execute every step in our flow. Let me move myself out of the way. Oh no. Let me move myself out of the way. There we go. And now on the right, I can see all the inputs or all the steps executed. I can kind of dig in and understand what's going on. So input makes sense. I got a domain. And then website scraper, it's giving me a big blob of text. Not very useful as a human, not things I would think I would ever say, but as a robot, extremely useful. As an AI, I can take this and be like, oh, I understand what this company does because I can summarize it. So let's take a next step where we're taking the output, taking the scraped website, the information from the site, passing it to AI to summarize. Now in Gumloop, that's a step. That's going to be a node. I'm going to move myself out of the way one more time. There we go. And what I want to do is I want to use AI. Now there are very many different ways of using AI. Ask AI, that's kind of like chatting to ChatGPT at its scale, or Claude. Extract data. This is saying, hey, I want to extract information, maybe contact details from a page, maybe clauses from a contract. Categorizer. This is saying, I'm going to give you categories. Tell me what this fits into. Is this a positive social media post? Is this a negative social media post? Basically, these are just simpler ways of using AI that are built into nodes. We're going to use the most common one, Ask AI. This is saying, let's do a prompt. Now, what I like to do here is imagine what would I do in ChatGPT? I would copy paste all the information from the website and say, summarize, give me a 2-line description around what this company does. And we can replicate that here at scale. So I can say, summarize what this company does based on their website content into a 2-line description. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see it. And I'm also going to paste this in the chat. If I can bring it up. Here we go. I'm always going to put all prompts into the chat, and I'm also going to share this workflow after, so you can apply it and play around with it while in your workflows as well. So here, I want to pass in website content. Now, this information lives in this node, just like we did before, 2-step process. I'm going to insist. So what do? We connect, and then we pass website content. So now it's going to understand that that is the website we want to summarize. Let's run this one more time. What is this doing? Grabbing the domain, scraping, summarizing, and then we could see that happening on the right here. Let me see if there are any questions while that's running. All right, let's look at the description. Gumloop is an AI-powered no-code. Let me paste that into the chat as well. There you go. Oh, it's too long. So there's a question, how can I see what is being scraped? You can go to that step on the right, see all inputs and outputs, website content. And then you could see the output. So this is true for any node, always on the right, you can see what the inputs and outputs are for each one. So I can see that the AI response is this right here. And if I go back, I want to output the description. So this will make sense once we start putting everything together. I'm going to use an output like that. And I'm going to say I want to output, I'm going to zoom in, a description. And that's coming from the AI. Great. So now we have gives a domain, scrapes, outputs a description. We also wanted the number of employees at the company. If I go back to my little diagram, which I really love, we're going to use Apollo to enrich. So let's go to our node library and let's bring up Apollo. Now, a few things I want to mention here. First up, you'll notice that you're greeted with a prompt. Now in Gumloop, we have a certain types of nodes which we call MCP nodes, which you can simply prompt and it'll create the node for you that does exactly what you want it to do. But there's so many things you can do with Apollo. You can say, hey, give me the top executives at this company. Give me the description. Give me the number of folks that work at this company. You can see all the different tools that are available in Gumloop for Apollo. So instead of creating 10, 15, 20 nodes that do what we think you want to do with Apollo, you can simply prompt. And we're going to build the node on the fly. So let's write out what we want. So I'm going to say, given a domain, return the number of employees at that company. So this is essentially saying the input is going to be domain, and what I want you to return is number of employees at that company. So now when I execute this, we have AI assessing what it thinks the inputs and outputs of this node should be. Perfect. We see domain, employee count. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. We can even kind of request changes. I'm going to say, can you also include, what would we want? Company name. Sometimes the domain is not necessarily. Let's do company name. And now we're reassessing what the inputs and outputs of this node are. So we have domain, employee count, company name. It does exactly what you wanted to do. And now we're going to generate the code. This is essentially, hey, I want these inputs and outputs using Apollo. Let's generate that. So Claudia, great question around the pricing. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. That's a great, great question. So how do we charge for Apollo contacts? So now it's generating the code. Now, don't worry if you are not a developer. I don't necessarily understand code. We're going to have the AI write it for you, and you can validate that the inputs and outputs are what you want it to be. So we can see that code kind of streaming in. But again, we don't have to worry about it. We're just kind of seeing it exist. That's great. And let's do gumloop.com as our domain. We're going to run a test. And if we're happy with the inputs and outputs, we can then save this node and use it in any of our flows. Perfect. Gumloop, company name, employee count. We've just created a node that does exactly what we want it to do. And now we can save it in any of our flows. This is useful in two ways. One is that you can essentially create something that's custom, right? So in this case, we don't necessarily know what you want to build. And second, you can chain things together. So if you're using something like Google Sheets, you can say, hey, read the Google Sheet, filter down based on this column and then paste to another sheet. Whereas before, that would take 10, 15 filter nodes and steps. With the prompt, you can simply create what you need. And we're really kind of releasing new nodes mainly through MCP because of the flexibility that it provides to you, and because we've been so happy and you've been so happy with what everyone is building. So super excited to kind of bring more MCP nodes. So let's finalize this node. Let's give it a name. So I'm going to call this just live so we can differentiate it. Let's save the node. And now it's a node in our workflow. So what does it do? It takes as input a domain like that, and it outputs employee count and company name. Fantastic. Like we've just built that on the fly, and it can do exactly what we wanted to do. So let me output, and then Claudia, I'll answer your question around how do we charge? What is the pricing of Gumloop? Let me actually connect directly to the existing output. So I can do this. What do I want to output? Let's just do employee count, like so. So what does this little flow do? It takes as input a domain, grabs the company description, summarizes it, gets employee count and company name, and then outputs it. Let's run the whole thing. And then here you'll see at the bottom right, we have credits. This is essentially how much this flow is costing you in Gumloop credits. I'm just going to spend a moment here while this is running. Let's switch to camera. So Gumloop doesn't charge you unless we are charged. So we're going to charge you for Apollo because we have to pay Apollo for those contacts. We're going to charge you Gumloop credits when an AI step is run because we have to pay that provider. But all of that is included in your Gumloop subscription, right? So let's go back here and I'll walk through kind of how this works. So for instance, in this Ask AI, you can hover over and see how many Gumloop credits this cost us. Let me turn on the lights in the studio again. There we go. So essentially, if you're using your own API key, it's going to cost you 1 credit. If you're using standard AI models, it's 2 credits, 30 for expert, 20 for advanced. You see in Gumloop, you have access to pretty much any model that's out there. You can choose what you want to use for this specific step. Now, simpler steps, like summarizing, you might want to use 4.1 mini, which will cost you 2 credits. And if you're writing reports with a lot of HTML and really complex queries, you can upgrade to something like O3, where it's going to cost you more credits, but everything here is included in your subscription. So these are always charged Gumloop credits, and depending on what plan you are, you get a set amount of Gumloop credits. Writing to Google Sheets, reading from Google Sheets, your CRM, all of those steps are free. We charge you when we get charged. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know. That was a great question. Not that there are bad questions. All questions are good. Okay, so we've built the first step here. We've built Enrich Company. Now remember, our goal is to take a lead email, enrich it, but also enrich contact. So I'm going to introduce this concept of subflows. So we're going to call this, I'm going to see this flow if you can, we're going to call this Enrich Company. This is like a piece. This is like a small section of our automation. I'm going to create a new flow, which we'll call Enrich Lead. So this is where we're building this right here. So I'm going to take the lead email. That's going to be our input. We're going to call this lead email. I'll still use Max. Max@gumloop.com. You can use your own API. So if you have there's a question, can I use my own ChatGPT connection? So if you have an API agreement with OpenAI or Claude, you can use your own API keys and it'll reduce the cost of a step. Cool. So let's go ahead and say, okay, I want to, if I go back to here, I want to now take this email and enrich the company. Now we just built that. We just built that right here. Takes a domain and outputs the employee count and the company description. So what I want to do is I want to connect this to this right here. So first I need the domain. Now there are 2 ways of doing this. You can use what I would call the lazy way, which is what I'm going to use, which uses AI. So I'm going to extract data. I'm going to say, we're going to take the email, remember connect, The email information I want to extract from is the email. And what I want to extract is the domain. So going to give it a little more context here. Extract domain from email address. Going to even give an example. So aaron@gumloop.com, return gumloop.com. And here we can really use a very simple model that's not going to cost us too much. So let's run that. Now, pro tip, you can actually format nodes now. There we go. So it gave me my domain. Now that we have the domain, I can go and say, well, now I want you to enrich the contact. But we've already built that. So I can call that thing we just built with the domain. So this is one of the big value and unlocks of Gumloop, is that every time you build something, it becomes a small reusable piece in the rest of your flows. You build something that extracts data from Salesforce in a way that's really useful for you, but it's probably useful for your teammates as well. You can share a subflow and repurpose it. So that's what we call subflows. So what I want to go to subflows, and I have enrich company. You can kind of think of this as a node, right? It's a node that you've built that does all of this. So what does it do? It takes a domain as input, and it outputs a description and employee count. Let's try a different email, so we're not always using an example. Let's do Dropbox. So what is this going to do? It's going to grab the email, extract the domain, and then enrich the company. It's going to run the thing we just built. We can see it running right here. So I need some like jokes or something when the flows are running. So if anyone has a good source of jokes, or so maybe we play like Jeopardy music or something. There we go. We see the output. We have a Dropbox provides secure cloud storage, 2,300 employees, and we see that it's run successfully. That's the subflow. So subflows are basically little flows that you've already built that you can repurpose many times. So instead of those really complicated multi-step flows in Gumloop, what a great flow looks like, it looks like this. It says it takes the email, runs an enrich company, enrich contact, very simple flows. Now, next we want to enrich the contact. What do we mean by that? We want to use Apollo to get title, seniority, and employment history. Very easy. We go to Apollo and we say, given an email, let me zoom in, return the seniority. I really need to learn to type seniority. What did I say? I wanted title and employment history of the contact. We're going to generate that just like before, whether you're using Apollo or any other MCP nodes. First going to be understanding what are the inputs and outputs of your flow, of your step. So here it's saying, I want to grab an email. Do you want to reveal personal emails? And then seniority, title, employment history. So no, we're going to remove that. And now we can generate the code. Now here it's giving me employment history as a list. Let's leave that. Let's leave that. Let's see what it comes up with. Now it's going to go ahead and write the code, and then we're going to execute it once to make sure that the output is what we expect. And once we've done that, we've built a node that does exactly what we wanted to do. So Danny's going with the flow. That's correct. Many flow puns are about to be used on this live stream for sure over the next coming weeks. Hernando, impressive to see MCP nodes in action. Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. I feel a little bit like a superpower every time I get one or I use one. I'm like, oh wow, I just built a thing. I just built a node, right? Very cool. So we see that the code has been written. And I can run a test. Let me use max@gumloop.com once more, just to test. And I really do encourage you to use MCP nodes on your end. There we go. So we have founder, co-founder, and CEO, and then we have a list of experiences in JSON format, right, of that Microsoft engineer. Perfect. This is perfect. We've got a node that does exactly what we wanted to do. We can finalize that node. I'm going to call this Apollo Enrichment Live. Let's save that node. And now, well, we have our little enrichment step. We can bring it in, pass in the lead email, and then this is going to output seniority, title, employment history. So as always, we come back to what our flow should look like. We've done this. We've done this. So we have this, we have this, we have this. Now we want to bring in the ICP. Now, often what you do within kind of trying to understand your ICP, you got to give weights to different elements, right? You're going to say, oh, well, if the number of employees is greater than 400, let's say give it X, 20 points, 30 points. If the, seniority is VP and up, we're going to give X amount of points. But that is actually not how you think about your ICP. Often your ICP is a document, right? So in this case, we're loop grid. Our ICP is someone between 10 and 500 million in revenue with a certain employee count. But there are many factors that go into defining what we look for. So instead of doing these arbitrary weights and kind of sizing what we do in our case, what we want is just to say, hey, AI, read this whole document. Take the enrichment details that we've pulled in so far, and I want you to score 1 through 10 how much of a fit this particular lead is with our ICP. And what this allows you to do is to keep working on your document, to keep refining what your definition is without going into arbitrary weights. We can also do weights. You can also kind of enrich this and put in the information. But let's go ahead and read this Google Doc. In Gumloop, that's really easy. We're going to go to Docs, Google Docs, like so. I'm just going to paste in the URL like that. And then that's going to give me the doc content. So now let me kind of arrange this a little bit. Boom. So if we go back here, let me run just so we see the doc content. It's going to run the whole flow, and then I could resume from any step. Yes, Adrian, we have let go of the ergonomic keyboard, but that's okay. Well, maybe we'll bring it back. We'll bring back the ergonomic keyboard, depending on how often I do this. So now we're running, and I want to see, we see the Google Docs reader. We have the whole document in text format that we can give to AI. So now we want to bring all of this information into an AI step. So we're going to use the Ask AI, like so. And we want to pass in pretty much everything we've used so far. So let's connect like so. And now's a good time. Let's format. Isn't that much more beautiful? There you go. So what do we want? We say, okay, given contact and company information below and our definition of an ICP, give a score out of 10 on how much this contact matches our ICP. Only output the score out of 10, i.e. 2, 4, 5, 7, etc. Do not include any explanations. Now, you can, I would recommend probably as you're building this out on your end to have the AI explain why it thinks so before you kind of implement into production, right? But we just want to see, and now we can provide the context. So I can say, okay, here's our ICP information. I'm going to say ICP document, and I'm pulling information from previous steps. Now I want contact information, and I'm going into our enrichment. So I'm going to say seniority, title, and I'm going to keep employment history for a moment. I want to talk to that about after. And then company details, description, like so, and then employee count. And you could see how this can be iterative as you build more enrichment, as you refine your doc content. This flow will get better and better. And let's pick maybe 03. No, I think 4.1 will be fine. And we can also pick Claude. Let's get some Anthropic for Claude Sonnet. Sure. We can save. And you could also test different models against each other. Let's run the whole flow. And now we've built pretty much our enrichment. This takes an email, enriches the company information, then takes our ICP, enriches that contact, and then uses AI to give us a score out of 10. What match is that specific contact for our definition of M right here? So it gave us a 3. So this is looking at Drew Houston, or Houston, depending on where you're from, to our ICP. Now this makes sense, right? Our ICP is marketing operations managers, VP of marketing, not necessarily the CEO. And our target is mid-market and enterprise marketing teams. This doesn't match our ACP that's well. And so we can now start iterating over that flow. Now, what I want to bring you to is, well, how do we bring this into here? And then how do we bring in employment history as well? So those are the two things we'll do. That will end the stream there, or the webinar. If you have any questions, as always, drop them in the chat. I will have time at the end to answer any questions about Gumloop or this flow specifically. So the first thing I want to bring your attention to is this employment history. Now, this is a list. So it is one item. So if we look at the previous runs, if we look at the output, it is a list. Now in Gumloop, when you're working with a list, it's a little different, and it's important to understand what's going on. So if I was to pass employment history here into contact information, and we have lessons about this at Gumloop University, we have a cohort as well. I'm going to plug that if you want to learn more about how to work with lists. So here I want employment history. Now this is a list. If I pass this list in, we're going to turn Ask AI into loop mode. This is essentially saying, give me a score for each item in the list. That's not what we want. We don't want to loop over the list. We want to have one output. So Jason, will you be able to watch the recorded version? Absolutely. Right away, actually. So right after this live stream, you can watch the whole thing. It's instantly available. So what I need is to turn this list into text. In Gumloop, I call that smushing. We need to smush the list into text. To do that, to smush, we need to use join list items. This is probably one of the more things that people fall into. They just paste lists into a text input, go into loop mode. So we're saying smush this into text, and we're going to call this experience. And now that we have it as text, we can pass it in to right here, right? So this is now a big blob of text. Let's actually run just this part so we can see that. I just clicked resume. That allows you to save kind of steps in your flows. We're just executing the new nodes. And we could see experience is now one big blob of text. If I go to enrichment, it is a list. Great. So now we have our output, including employment history. And now we can output this. So what do we want to output? And then we're going to put it all together into our Google Sheet. And we'll have our enrichment flow. What do we want to output? We want to output score lead score. That's going to be from the AI, from the previous step. What else do I want to enrich? I want description. And that, where is description coming from? Description is coming from Enrich company, like so. Once you start playing, it's kind of like you're just putting things like puzzles in a piece. Once you've built out everything you need. Title. That's coming from Enrich contact right here. Boom. I have title. Let's also output seniority. And then I think that's everything. Number of employees is the one I'm missing. Number of employees. Great. That is coming from Enrich company. Great. Let's save that. Now we have our little enrichment. Let's clean it up a little bit. Oh, so much better. Let's collapse. Ah, that feels great. Okay. It takes as input an email, enriches the contact, enriches the company, reads our ICP, and then outputs all of that information. So now we have this little piece, right, that uses enrich lead. And now we can create a flow that reads our Google Sheet and does this for every row in our sheet, right? So then all we have to do is read this, run the thing we just built, and update all of these columns. We can do it all at once in Gumloop, and then we can also set it up such that every time there's a new row, a new contact in our CRM. I'm using Google Sheets because everyone understands Google Sheets. It's simple. But you can also do this in any of your CRMs. So we want to call this, sorry, let me call this little flow. We're going to call this read Google Sheets. So we're going to go to Google Sheets reader. I'm going to pick my enrichment list. Like so. What does this output? It outputs the emails, the name, all the information from the sheet. Great. So now I have my list of emails that I want to enrich. Well, we just built this enrich lead flow that takes as input an email, so we can use that one. So we go to subflows, enrich lead. We're passing it in. Now here, remember before I didn't want it to go into loop mode? Here I do. I do want it to enrich each email in my list. If I go here, I want it to run once for Max, once for Reed, and once for Brian, right? I want to run that enrichment for every email in my sheet. And then what I want to do, just so we're not, I want to update my Google Sheet. So I'm going to go to Sheet, Google Sheets Updater. Now, what do I want to do? Let's pick the enrichment again. And what do I want to do? I want to update the number of employees, the description, the title, the seniority, and the lead score. So those are the columns I want to update. So let's start by picking those. Let's go here. Columns is going to be number of employees, description, title, seniority, and lead score. Where is this information going to come from? It's going to come from here. So those are all the elements I want to update. Let's update a single row at a time. So I want to update the lead score. We're going to go into loop mode because I want to update one row at a time. Next, I want to update the description, the seniority, the number of employees, and the title. Now, it's important I say, well, for which item do I want to update? Right? So I already said that the column I want to look into right here is email, and I need to provide the list of emails. So we're going to pass it right here. And we're going to go email list. So let me walk you through what's happening here. We're going to read a list of emails. We're going to read Max, Reed, Brian, Drew. Then for each one of those, we're going to enrich. We're going to use everything we've built so far, right? That's going to output a lead score, description, title, seniority, number of employees for each contact, right? Then I want to say, okay, go to each row, find Max, and then update his information. So if we run the whole thing, we're going to read all the contacts. We can see now we're processing in parallel all of the different leads. Then we're updating the Google Sheets. There we go. Lights back. Okay. There's some questions. Now's a good time. We've got about 2 minutes. This is going to be done in just a moment. So everything I've built so far should be available on any plan. We're not using triggers. We're not using webhooks or anything like that. So all of this should process. There we go. So we see that we're getting low lead scores. That's fine. There we go. Now we're updating the Google Sheet. And now we have our Google Sheet fully updated. Let me kind of you can see that all the different columns are updated. And we've built our flow. So now, anytime we click run, we can update lead scores across all of them. Now, one last thing I want to bring to your attention. What if you wanted to say every time there's a new contact here, right? So I add a new contact and I want to go ahead and enrich this flow. That's very easy. So right now we're running it manually on run. You can activate as flow trigger. So in Gumloop, there are different triggers. Let me bring back the triggers. On a time, Gmail, HubSpot, Airtable. In our case, we want to use Google Sheets. We want to turn that on. Now you'll note that this makes the output text instead of list. So you just need to turn list mode off. And that's it. And now this flow, if I save it, every time there's a new row added to Google Sheets, it's going to go ahead and enrich that contact automatically. You can add as many, you can enrich. There's a question around how many leads can I enrich? Hundreds if you want. You can run this one by one, or as we are here, or run it on a list. So that is how you enrich and score any lead with AI using Gumloop. So I'm just gonna, for folks that need to drop off, go here. Thank you for joining. That's what I wanted to cover with you. Next steps here, I'm going to drop into, we have another live stream next week coming with a new partner, Appify. So I'm going to drop a link to that. It's also going to be in right there. So we're going to talk about brand monitoring and how you can monitor your brand's online presence using Appify, grabbing information from Instagram, TikTok, and other places. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat around this specific workflow. But really appreciate you all joining. I hope you'll join us next week, same time, same place. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, did I miss anything? Let me go through the chat. So there's a question from Sneha. How do we reply this information? Let's say you want to send an email for a new lead. Very, very easy. Let's go ahead and do that. Let me go back to right here. At the end of this flow, so let's collapse all of this like that. We can just send a Gmail sender. So you can reply, you can connect the lead you just got. Hey, we've received your lead, your, maybe not call them lead, your information. So that is simply another step in your workflow. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, that is where I'll leave you today. So please join us on Gumloop University. We also have cohorts. So I'm going to drop a link. Let me grab the cohort link where we do 3-day sessions around learning Gumloop. That is also going to be in the description. Really appreciate you all joining. I hope to see you here, same time, same place next week, where we're going to talk about brand monitoring. And if you keep coming, I'll keep making these webinars. So really appreciate you all joining. Have a great week. Thank you all. Bye-bye.